Hey, what's the matter, you?
We are
All
on
right,
air.
so today we're going to be discussing The Grapes of Wrath, written by John Steinbeck, 1939. I'd say at a high level, it's about a family who's poor, gets kicked off their land, and is part of a migration out west to find work and a new life. That's just the high level. It's um, the era is the 1930s during the Dust Bowl. Just to give you some background. Um, After the Great Depression, but the country and it's I guess is that are they starting World War II now? Germany seemed 1939 when he's writing this. It's probably the beginning of the war.
Yep. I think it
Okay.
started at 40.
All right. So I kind of wanted to make this more about like just I don't want to be like a book report or anything. So I kind of had um, I had it generate just slides that we can discuss things about. So during that era, you had 25% unemployment. There was 300,000 and more people were migrating because of over the way that they were farming back then. The topsoil was depleted, and there was a drought. So a lot of farms weren't producing, and the banks were getting rid of the sharecroppers. There was a 7-year drought apparently, wiped out the Great Plains. So the banks foreclosed on farms for shareholders. It was the logic of the system mainly, that not that the banks are evil. It's interesting how they view it though. Like they view them sort of as this like machine that can't stop growing, and like the
Yeah,
people that are
profit machine. It's like
and
a
the,
it's a
the
beast.
people that are driving the tractors are kind of more like machines, like extensions of the bank, just going through and knocking on them off the land.
No, that's a great scene, right? So these are sharecroppers, right? These are the Okies, and the sharecroppers were people that didn't own the land, right? They allowed to live on the land, but they didn't own it. Sometimes they got a percentage of the whatever they grew, percentage of the harvest, that kind of a thing. But that's what they lived on, and some of them were living on this land for generations of sharecroppers. So it was still quite a displacement of a large group of people, and they all migrated on the famous Road 66 out west, to the promised land.
Right. And just some background is that they're Okies. I guess that was like a slang for these people from Oklahoma, which the people in California and along the way looked down on them because they were poor, and they were begging, and they were dirty, and they smelled probably, and they get labeled as Reds. Which during that time there was the communist scare, and I think his name was McCarthy. Is that correct, Mike? McCarthy
Yes,
with the Red Scare.
McCarthy, Senator McCarthy was for the communist scare. Yes.
And so any demand for decent wages, they were just branded a communist because it was an easy way for them to be dehumanized and hatred and mistreated by the police and by the local people.
I will say that is part of our, it's kind of a double-edged sword in our country, right? So we've always been strong individualists, right? Ralph Waldo Emerson's famous essay, which I'll probably go over here one time, Self-Reliance, right, is all about, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, relying on only yourself, a strong individual, et cetera, et cetera, self-made man, et cetera. But the problem with that, on the other side of that, is that when somebody can't do that, one other point relating to that, if you look at like Ayn Rand, right? So Ayn Rand is sort of famous for, the two main books, right? Atlas Shrugged was probably her best known, but The Fountainhead also. And those are also all about sort of the pride of capitalism, doing it yourself, creativity, innovation, self-made people, and how they are sort of the stuff that America is built on, and that's a good thing. Stephen, not Stephen Peck, Dr. Scott Peck had pointed out that one thing you don't notice in a lot of Ayn Rand's books is old people and children. It's an interesting assessment, and I think it relates to here too. The dark side of strong individualism is you tend to blame people for their failures. So, like, take these Okies. It's easy to look down on them if you blame them. It must be a flaw in you. You must be less of a person to not be able to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, or the failure was by your own cause. And that makes it easier to hate them.
Yeah. All right. This is just another topic of, it kind of seems that he's placing these two groups of people, like the owners against the workers. And I guess that's been a story for a long time and all throughout human history. And it seems like the bank is this monster that must grow, no conscience, only appetite.
That's a great scene in the book, right? So, of course, it's a fiction book, but fantastic writing. And of course, we're talking about the main characters here. And one of them that you're talking about is when they pay the tractor drivers to go and destroy the little shanty houses that the sharecroppers are living in to get them off the land, to force them off the land.
Right.
You know, they're there with their guns. They're like, "I'll shoot the bastard."
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, shoot. You know, I'm just getting told what the bank's doing. He's like, "I'll go shoot the bank manager." He's like, hey, remember, the bank manager's getting told by New York, you know? And then he's like, "Well, I'll fine." He's like, "There's no one to shoot." You know, it's just a corporation. It's a money-eating machine.
Right.
You know? So I think a good analogy to that in sort of modern times, which actually President Trump has been strongly against, is this idea that hedge funds should own individual houses, right? It's kind of the same idea. You think of individual houses and you want to strengthen families, but then on the other hand, you got these very wealthy hedge funds buying up all these single family houses and jacking up the price for everybody else.
Yeah.
Hurts the middle class.
Right. Well, there's definitely a dark side to capitalism. You know, that's, I think that there's probably no better system, but I don't think it's far from perfect, you know, because you can have so much manipulation. And the problem is also that they write the rules through committees and contributions, or they have their rules prioritized, and they write the laws or help write the laws, and then it benefits them in the end, you know. So it's a system.
It's an interesting thing when you look at, like you're getting at, say, communism versus capitalism. They both have flaws. Where communism flaws is communism denies human nature. Communism pretends, everybody's equal, everybody's going to hold hands and sing kumbayas. The problem is, if you're smart and you're a hard worker and the guy next to you is a lazy piece of garbage, you don't want to be paid the same amount. So that's the failure of communism. And then, of course, add on to that, the people in power treat themselves differently because that's also human nature. And therefore, they get the largesse and then they lie to maintain power. On the capitalist side, it's also a problem with human nature. But the one strength that capitalism brings, if it's in a free democratic society. Now, again, I am not for laissez-faire capitalism, because laissez-faire capitalism means capitalism, supply and demand, and anything goes. And you're right, you know, it needs some amount of regulation. However, one last point, the only thing that saves capitalism and makes it a better system than communism is competition. Because competition is what keeps people in check. So when you allow people to compete on an even playing field, you tend to get a lot of competition, and that competition is what keeps the greed in check.
But also a lot of people tried to do monopolies and get rid of competition, where they talked with the competition to change the rules to favor them, or to price manipulation or different. They've always tried to bend it to their you know, because profit is king, or the shareholders are king, or
no, especially when they grow really big, right? And if there's only a few of them, and you really don't have strong competition, you have a few big guys, then it's easy for them to get in a room or at their country club and to sort of do price setting, which is illegal. So
Yeah. Some of the things that were mentioned was I thought was interesting is that when the man, at the last farm that they get to, the guy is not only has them working there and living there, and then the store, he owns the store too, and he ups the prices of everything in the store. So he's got like, and there were a whole, I guess there were some some corporations that had their own towns and stuff. I'd have to look it up the name, but where the person
you're
not only
talking
had all
about
the,
where they're picking the fruit.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were other times where they had these basically towns where the people would work, they lived, they had to buy the houses from the same person, and there was a store, and I forgot the name. I think one guy even had his own money. We'd have to look that up. I think he
Yeah, no, it's also, that just didn't happen on the farms. It also happened in the coal miners of West Virginia. In fact, there's a famous song. I think it's called $16. I owe $16 to the company store or something like that. It's
Yeah.
about that culture where you get the whole town works for the coal mine. The coal miners, they live in little coal miner shacks. They go to the little, like you said, the company owned store. So everything's around just working the coal mines.
Right. There's also I think it was a funny part was when they were trying to the narrator. It seemed to me to have the best insights into like one of them was when the guy was selling the car and he's like, I just wish I had 1,000 jalopies to sell, and he's and anybody who came in was just they were obviously trying to maximize the profit, and they would say
Right.
anything to get that to sell them some jalopy. Just that mindset. It was an interesting and funny mindset of the guy who he just said done anything to sell a car.
There's a lot of, I don't think it's I think the plot sort of ends poorly. I don't, John Steinbeck's my favorite author, but he does not, his plots are kind of weak. He does the ambiguous endings a lot. It's not a happy ending. It's not a tragic ending. It's kind of what would be called an ambiguous ending. Uh, However, the writing is, of course, phenomenal, and the scenes that he writes they're just amazing. There's so many. And did you find what was your favorite scene? Did you figure out which is my favorite scene?
No, I can't say. I can't really say. I don't know. I think one of my favorite scenes is in the beginning when he meets the preacher, and the preacher is like having some, he's speaking outwardly, but telling some secrets of how he used to sleep with the girls. I laughed out loud at that part because he was a
Yeah.
preacher, and he'd go out back and lay with them. They had so much Holy Spirit in them. He's like,
How
oh
did I
yeah,
know?
so much Holy Spirit.
The mention of the fallen preacher is your favorite scene. He's out.
That was
I
funny.
got so filled with the Holy Spirit, I had to lay with him. I had to fill him with my Holy Spirit. No, so that's a good one. And in fact, the preacher, I actually love the statement that the preacher makes. He is in fact, he comes right out in the beginning and says, I'm not a preacher anymore. I can't be a preacher because he's a sinner. And he also says that, I I lost my faith. I don't have faith. And then at one point he says, I kind of believe that it's the human spirit and all the human spirits together into one big spirit, and that's what we call God. Um, I kind of I kind of know where he's coming from with that. I've thought that myself. I used to call it the divine shard theory. You know, um, it's different. It's obviously I would be considered heretical for saying that, but there is something good in that, right? If you think that all life is sacred and that all life holds part of the divine spark, and it's kind of also kind of blends into this whole, is it every person for themselves or is it us working together, as humanity as a whole? So, and then of course we'll see that theme over and over. But let me tell you my favorite scene. My favorite scene, and it's so vivid and so well done, is the trucker scene with the waitress. And I have to try to remember the waitress's name. I'll try to find it later, but the scene is fantastic. It starts out with this waitress. She's kind of a middle-aged woman, and she's in this roadside cafe on 66. And of course, she's loved, her best customers are the truckers. So she loves the truckers. She's like, the truckers. And they're coming in and she's flirting with them and she's doing her thing. So there's a couple truckers and Mel's cooking in the back and the waitress is at the counter, and drives in a family of Okies, and they stop, and the guy comes in there and he's got his little felt hat and he's got two little rugrats, two little dirty kids beside him, and he's saying, can you sell me enough bread for, he had some amount of money, whatever, 40 cents.
The 10 cents and the bread was a 15-cent thing, a loaf.
Right, 20 cents. So he could only buy half a loaf because he didn't have enough money. She's like, well, that's, like you said, that's a 40-cent loaf. And he's like, he's like, can you cut it in half so that I can get 20 cents worth? He's like, I don't want to cheat anybody. And we're kind of tight, we're going all the way to California. And she says, no, you can't do that. And then Mel's griping from the back. He's like, give him the damn bread, and he's doing his cooking thing. And he's like, okay, well, if Mel says it's okay. And she sees the kids staring at the candies. And he's like, and the guy's taking out his money, gives her the 20 cents, and she gives him the loaf of bread. And then he accidentally took out an extra penny. So he's holding up the penny, and he's like, and then he sees the kids staring at the candy, and he's like, is that 2 for a penny candy? He's like, oh no, she's like, is that penny candy? He says like, oh no, that's 2 for a penny candy. So she ends up giving them the candy, and then of course Mel goes, that's not 2 for a Mel or one of the truckers goes, that's not 2 for a penny candy. She's like, you just shut up. And then the truckers are about to leave. They finish their meal. One of them throws down his tip. The other one looks at it, kind of nods his head, says, well, whatever, throws down his tip, and they walk out. So long story short, and then of course the kids hop up, and he just describes them like these little chipmunks hopping in the back, and they got their whole car loaded down. Anyway, the end of the scene is that she looks at the truckers and she's like, they both left a quarter, which is, in those days, that's like a big deal. So she gave the guy a break on 20 cents on his bread, and it was whatever, 5 cents a piece candy. She gave him 2 for 1 cent. But meanwhile, both truckers gave a quarter each. So she made out in the end. And then she ends it with truckers. Love that.
How don't you think that the ending wasn't tragic with the baby stillborn and him throwing it into the water so that it could float down and them find it to understand how they are, and then she goes in and finds purpose by letting the dying man suck on her breast to have the milk. I mean, that's such an amazing scene.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that it wasn't an ending or it wasn't tragic. You're right. It was tragic, but it wasn't really an ending. You did not resolve like what happened to the family, what happened to Tom. In other words, what it is really the women, of course, were trying to hold the family together. And the matriarch was really responsible for holding the family together. And that's what she's trying to do through the whole story. How can I keep my family together amongst these series of tragedies? And so it does end, but that's what I mean by an ambiguous ending. You don't know how Tom resolves. You don't know what happens to the preacher. You don't really know what in the end happens to any characters. It just ends, like you said, with the stillborn baby. And then, but even then, you don't give up. She helps the dying man.
Right. I also I like the part when I think it was like a cop was talking to a guy, and he's like, they all want to get on assistance, these people, and the guy's like made a point to the cop is that, but that these corporations get subsidies from the government, isn't that the same thing as assistance? Pointing out the hypocrisy of You know, like it's not, welfare is not shameful, you know, if the person really needs it.
Right.
You know, we give a lot of money to corporations.
And that, I mean, that's the hard thing, right? I mean, we've got real. I mean, I don't think anybody minds a safety net. I don't think any, but it was never intended to be a generational program. The biggest problem with welfare is you have people gaming the systems, whether it's just, having lots of baby daddies to pop out another kid to get more assistance. I mean, it's not supposed to be a generational thing. It's supposed to be a hand up for people who fall into, hardship. Um, so I don't think anybody denies that. I think people don't like the fraud and generational laziness where
But
they're growing
statistically,
up on
it's
both.
but statistically, it's never proven to be the majority of people. It's a small group of people that do that. It's not like
I don't know. I'd have to see what. It's a good point. I'd have to see what the statistics are. I don't know what they are. I know. I mean, right now they're trying to weed out a lot of the fraud in the system because there's a lot of fraud, But there is also other problems. I think one of the other big problems with the welfare system is they have the poverty line very, very low. Like the poverty limit is very low, and then once you sort of go above even that really low threshold, you go above it by like $1, you get like kicked off. There's no sort of gradient system where the people who are actually trying to get out of it, you should be supporting that. You shouldn't, it should be a gradient reduction of benefits, not you're over $1 and you get totally kicked off everything.
Right.
So there are, it's like any
It
system.
incentivizes them to make a move, right? Because
Yeah, it's like anything. We need to be smart about what we're doing. And I agree with you on this point. In other words, you can do it in a heartless manner. You can do it in a hypocritical manner. If you're like you said, if you're giving billions of dollars to to
find oil.
corporations, or even you're spending billions of dollars on a stupid war that nobody wants instead of spending it on your own people, yeah, that's a problem. And we should have. I mean, I'm a fan of the America First agenda. Unfortunately, I think we're doing stuff right now that we're even violating our own principles on that. Right? We're off sort of. I will say there is one difference, right? You don't want to see Iran with a nuclear weapon because they're clearly not responsible. They've been problems in that Middle East forever, but we're still spending billions that we don't have on destroying their capabilities. So yeah.
Right. I mean, well, and last year it was 1.79 trillion added to the.
Do you see
Which
that?
is almost identical to the year before under Biden. So it's not like they're saving any money doing all the things they've done.
Yeah.
Do you see that chart right there with the different wheels that the kids got?
Yeah.
In the picture.
Yeah.
It's got like different front tires than the back tires. Do you remember? I don't know who it was in the family. It was either Frank. I think it was Frank. He had a bike, and it was cut at the front, where it only had the back, and he stuck the front end into a shopping cart where you could wheel, you could pedal, and the shopping cart would move.
I never remember that. No.
No, you don't remember. I don't know why I remember that. It's just funny when you take away all the things that for entertainment you entertain yourself with.
Yeah,
it is interesting to see this this photo. I will tell you, I watched a good movie last night on Netflix called Nuremberg, about the famous Nuremberg trial. It's from a book of one of the psychiatrists who really got to know Hermann Göring, and Göring was Hitler's second in command. And but at that famous trial, it was the first time they showed the liberation of the concentration camps. It is very difficult to watch. They showed the real footage in the trial, obviously not all of it, sort of snippets of it. And it is extremely hard to watch. It is heartbreaking. A lot worse than that. These are obviously poor people, but these are not tortured skeletons living, walking skeleton. It's heartbreaking. It's disgusting. It's very. I would challenge anybody to watch that footage and not feel either grossed out or sad or what. And of course, in the trial, it was actually the first time this footage was shown, and of course, there was not a dry eye in the place because it was that traumatic. So,
yeah. I just think that the book is interesting. I think it's a little bit too long, but the guy is obviously a talented writer, and that he makes you care about the characters that are, and that they're talking, and you're rooting for them, and they're interesting characters. I liked how you could see that when there was like this social contract in these Hoovervilles. That's what that shanty town is, and people looked after each other's kids. They would, there were certain rules and have polite behavior, civilized behavior, and people would talk and make the best of it and help each other if they could. And then they get to the government camp at one time and they see that they actually have running water and showers and toilets, and they're like, "Oh, this is amazing." They're actually scared of them at first.
I love the pick scene, right? When they finally get some work in California, and it's like digging a trench. And he's just like thrilled to be heaving a pick. And he's like, got the feel of it. And, feels good to be out there using his muscles and stuff like that. It was a good scene.
Yeah. This is just some talking points about the money, how they bring up money. Freedom equals money. You are only as free as you are wealthy. Without savings, you cannot refuse bad conditions. Liberty is a luxury. It seems like he's pointing out the owners versus the workers a lot. With this, how you only get so much per box of fruit. And then when the more workers come, then they change the price, and they're gonna try and make as much profit as possible, but the people can barely make enough money to eat. So the surplus labor was used against them to bring down the how much they're going to pay them. I think 2.5 cents a bucket it went down to, or something.
It'd be interesting when you think about, okay, even right now, right? Inflation is hurting a lot of people, and obviously grocery prices are still up. And there are lots of stories of people in the middle class and the lower middle class, and they are suffering. They are having to make tough choices, right? Do I pay my rent? Do I pay my bills? Do I buy all my medicine this month, or do I skip a month? There is people making tough choices right now because of the inflation costs. So if you're in the boardroom, and you're in a corporation, like a big grocery store, and you're saying, well, what if we give them, 10 chips instead of 15 chips in that bag, and we'll charge the same amount, right? So that's called shrinkflation. How do you do that when you're talking about, food that people are eating, and you're reducing you're affecting millions of people.
Right. Well, that's the thing about compassion, is not really compatible with profit only. Profit and compassion are not,
Right.
It's also hard to draw a connection when you're living in 70-degree, air conditioned, full belly, full, no worries about money. It's just so hard to relate. You don't feel it. You don't know what's going on. You don't stay connected. You don't really know. It's like, when you don't suffer it, who knows what a real hungry stomach is? I fasted for a day. It's like, when you don't know, it's so hard to get that compassion because it's hard to relate. It's very difficult.
And I also thought it was really interesting how he was bringing up, the narrator at some point was talking about how they're trying to stop them from organizing because they don't want them to revolt. Obviously, they don't want them to, because the owners could see how hungry, they want for nothing. The owners and the wealthy, they don't really want, but then they see these people that they'll do anything just to eat. They have desire in their eyes and we got to keep, if someone speaks up, he's got to go to jail, because we don't want any leaders, because then they'll unionize or they'll gain forces and take the land if they have to.
Right.
But when you have such disparity, like even now, they're saying it's just like the new Gilded Age. You have, I don't know what the exact statistics, but I think off the top of my head, it's like 1% of the population owns more than 45% of the wealth in the entire country.
Yeah, something crazy. It's definitely a huge disparity.
It's when is enough enough? I mean, and then I think it is human nature to hoard and protect your family and to make, you can justify things to keep your family safe and to keep your wealth up but at what point, I mean, like some people like Bill Gates or like, they and Warren Buffett are, I think, great examples of what philanthropy, that they are really trying to save people's lives, like from malaria and all those other things.
It's a very difficult question, right? I mean, I don't think anybody's got it right? How do you craft a system that brings the most people out of poverty? I mean, and there's plenty of people who argue that is our system. When you look at, and even what Joe is alluding to is our poverty is not even real poverty. You can't compare our poverty to, tribes in Africa or tribes or the slums of Brazil or Mumbai and India, etc. I mean, we don't know real poverty.
Right.
In essence, our social safety nets are a lot stronger than that, and not many people. I'm saying that aren't people going without food, but there is a lot of help at the bottom. Now you're still struggling. You're still not, you know what I'm saying? You're not have any security. But our definition of poverty is not other countries' definition of poverty.
There was this guy who had gotten married recently. I don't know. Let's just hypothetically say it was like a Dubai prince or something, and got married to this beautiful woman, and all of the famous people of all over the world, the richest people came. He's like the richest man in the world. This guy was like beyond comprehension, and he gave out like Rolex watches to everybody as just a partying gift that they showed up, and they had all of the people, and one of the famous actors was frowned down upon because he only gave him a Lamborghini that was worth $350,000 or something like that. I think Bill Gates had given him a $46 million plane, and the Zuckerberg gave like a $30 million yacht. I mean, we're talking about what waste. This guy has everything that he was given 3 times over. It sits and grows dust. There's no way he's using that. And to me, that's, again, I guess we're just different people. To me, that's gluttonous. To me, that's like, I don't get it. You know what I'm saying? I just can't relate. It's something that just doesn't click as to, are you just that wasteful with all of the need in the world? Oh, well, but I give to them. I give $10 million, but you gave a $90 million jet. I mean, it's like, oh, they satisfy that urge, and then that's not. And don't get me wrong, it's better than nothing. So don't put them down because they may make it less, or you know what I'm saying. I mean, thank goodness they do something.
I would say that's the sin of gluttony. I mean, to me, that's just clear. It's just a sin. But I think this part that Christian's bringing up here is sort of the real key, because when
it's so terrible.
Let's tie it together though. So think about it. People marvel at, how did Germans allow the Nazis to do what they did, right? It's the same point here. When it's right in front of your face, when it's right there, you see the person. What do you do individually, right? Do you help, or do you do us versus them and say you're dogs and kick them? I mean, people have done that, right? So that, to me, that's the real question, right? I do think, I mean, I do believe in sin. I believe things are sin. And I think those people committed the sin of gluttony because they didn't need, they're far beyond what they need, far beyond, not even close, you know. And I don't know how you square that. Like you said, I know how they rationalize it. Same way the Nazis rationalized things, you know. They were scared. They didn't want to get involved. But that's when the real thing comes out. When stuff's in front of your face, do you do the right thing or are you afraid of losing your job or losing, you know, people's respect or whatever instead of doing the right thing? And I think it's that kind of stark moral choice that everybody's got to decide. What would you do? You know, and are you really going to stand up when it's hard to stand up and do the right thing? I mean, it's not when it's almost, you know, it's easy to be good when it's easy, you know, but do you be good and do the right thing when it's hard? That's the real test.
But for the people that could actually be the ones saying to do it, like obviously the concentration camps, how do you look at that and not your entire heart cracked? Like, I don't care what, you must be a sick son of a bitch. If
But
you
they
can,
were smart in how they manufactured that with they did because there was a long period of like sort of re-educating the public and
Yeah.
schools and through literature, and it was a constant bombardment, and they were, you know, it's been, you know, they were
so
seen
you
as
think
less
it's
than
not
human. They
something
were apes or
visceral.
something. They were drawn
You
with these
don't think
big
there's
noses.
something visceral. You don't think there's something that should, something inside of you
Right. No, I
that
agree. But it's the same thing. It's always been the them. That's how these people, these dictators, they frame it in such a way, and then they have to get the population to be convinced. And what was the thing? If you lie enough, it becomes true. There's a famous saying that Hitler said: "If the bigger the lie, the more people believe it."
Yeah, I
well,
think
but
there's proven that multiple times in multiple ways. Famous psychological study of the fake prison guards versus the inmates. They created a fake prison, and they were amazed at how fast, they knew it was fake, but they started treating the prisoners badly. They were told they were bad. What Christian's alluding to is that the Jews in the newspapers, the true believers in the Aryan race, painted them as animals, drew caricatures of them with huge noses, and look how funny they are, and ha ha ha.
Right.
And it's classic us versus them behavior. And if you could separate, if you really believe they are quote unquote different from you, then you can treat them badly.
we
And
know they also did not show those images to the people of the cities. They didn't show the concentration, but they isolated all that. You know, they made them out to be bad, but they didn't show them what they were doing.
Yeah.
I mean, even this, how does the
that's true.
grower find oranges?
In fact, that was Goring's excuse. Goring's excuse was Himmler did it all. Himmler was the head of the SS. It's all Himmler. I didn't know anything. You know, a lot of them tried to play I was just following orders, you know.
But to dump grapes and kerosene, I mean, you're seeing people starving. How could you? That's
Right. In order to keep the prices high, anything. So
something
artificial scarcity. That was an interesting how they're burning. Yeah, they're starving, and then they're ruining it, putting kerosene on top of it, or letting it go bad, and you can't. I mean, that's sick.
That's
Yeah.
sick. I don't
I
get
guess
it.
they saying I saw an article on this too, is that there's 30 to 40% of food is wasted while 35 million Americans face food insecurity. They were saying because a lot of the vegetables, they don't look a certain way, they just get thrown, you know, and if it doesn't look perfect, it doesn't make it to the shelves, you know. So they were throwing away so much.
It's
It's
unbelievable.
crazy.
Yeah, I think that's just wrong. In fact, I think it's sick. It's actually just sick. You know.
This was another interesting one that maybe stood out to me because I just found it interesting. But in one of the camps, there's this religious woman who scares Rosa Sharon by saying, they're dancing close and they're sinners, and at the government camp when they have these dances, and she basically says that baby is gonna die, and the girl freaks out and thinks, because maybe she danced and she was sinful, that God's gonna punish the child. A superstition weaponized as judgment. And then what's I found interesting is that I don't know, maybe she believed in it, or all of a sudden she wanted to go work, and the mother's like, you don't really, you're getting big in the belly, you shouldn't be going out, it's cold. But she pushes it and she goes out, picks cotton, and then she gets wet and cold and she's shivering. And I don't think she really wanted to have the baby. Maybe there was some kind of internal struggle going on, or she thought she was sinful, and she sort of, and also the husband ran away
Right.
at some point, which is just a weird scene. I guess he goes down the river or something, decides not to stay with the
Yeah,
family
he can't
anymore.
support them. He's yeah.
So then she has the stillbirth, like Joe was saying near the end, and so the prophecy of that woman appears to be fulfilled. It was poverty. What really killed it was, they weren't eating right. She exposed herself and the country, that it was, they needed to eat and they needed to pick crops. So, they were just really, really in a bad way. And then at the end, she saves the stranger by breastfeeding the dying man. So it's sort of like a twist of fate on that whole thing. The woman, like the woman who should give life instead gives life to a stranger. She loses a baby but gives life to the stranger. So the prophecy is like inverted, I guess. Or
So some of this is kind of like, because compassion is a difficult subject. I actually think right now we have what I would call some elements of toxic compassion, or in other words, you can't have compassion for everything. I'll give you an example. Should you really have compassion for the disgusting criminal that was released 30 something times and killed Irina Zarutsky in Charlotte, North Carolina? No. How about no? Should you really have compassion for somebody that, comes over and isn't interested in working, is just coming over and then immediately jumps on welfare because they can? Again, when you have a system that's breaking, you can't do everything. You even compassion has to be. Or I'll give you another really easy one. So forget the immigrant one for a minute, because that one's a little harder. Because there is a certain amount of humanitarian compassion you should absolutely have as bedrock. But the first one, compassion for the criminal instead of the victim. Or here's another one. Should you have compassion for somebody's delusion? Somebody says, oh, I'm a woman, and even though they're biologically a man, and they want to go into the restroom where your daughter's changing for swimming. I'm sorry, not the restroom, the changing room. Absolutely friggin' not. I'm sorry, I'm not going to feel compassion for your delusion. My point being is, even compassion has to be based on a foundation of, and then again, so what I think you're getting at here, the foundation, of course, has to be, you have to have some foundation. Whether you say, well, the 10 Commandments, or whether you say some easy standard axioms that everybody agrees on. But the problem is, compassion without any of that almost becomes dangerous, because it's just an excuse to have no standards, an excuse to have no enforcement of anything.
Yeah.
Indiscriminate love. There has to be a limitation.
This is just this is what the AI thought that his message was, primary message of Steinbeck was that in the souls of the people, the grapes of wrath are filling and growing heavy for the vintage. So I think that has to do with how people are getting close to rebelling, right? I mean, he alluded to
Is
that.
that a quote from ChatGPT or a quote from the book?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that it sounds like it came from the author, but we'd have to Google that. Do you have anybody have that handy?
I'll check it.
So poverty is political. The Jodes are not poor because of laziness. They are poor because the system was engineered to keep them poor. This was and remains a radical claim. I think there's
Well,
definitely
I would
some
dispute
truth to
that.
that.
The system wasn't engineered to make them poor. The Dust Bowl wasn't engineered.
Well,
It
no,
was
I think he's speaking in a generality of the working class is kind of limited in most wealth has been inherited throughout time, right? I mean, most wealth. There are obviously innovative people who have done it, but your huge sources of wealth are passed down, like land, and passed down generationally. And people born in certain, of a certain culture or at a certain place and at a certain time are they're at a much harder disadvantage to pull themselves up by their bootstraps or do that. It's much harder for certain groups of people. Like in India, for example, if you were in the caste system and born into a lower caste, you almost had no chance of getting out of your caste.
right.
So,
Right. Yeah, I think that system's they're trying to struggle against it, but that system, of course, is ridiculous. Now we don't have that in the United States, and of course, this is talking about the United States.
right.
Uh,
But
but
some people, even in like the Adirondacks or something, there's poor people that have been poor since the Civil War. There's people that have been in these ghettos and that where if you're surrounded by people that are lazy or not doing something or drinking and drugging and stuff, it's much easier. It takes a very special person to pull themselves out of that.
right,
You know, some people can, and most people don't. Uh, but I agree with you also at the same time. It's not completely. It's not that there's no way out. It's just they've sort of bent the rules to advantage themselves. Corporations or and the wealthy, they're the smart people. They know what they're doing.
right. Yeah,
Dehumanization is a tool. What's that?
That's a tough bill. But like you said, the system was engineered to keep them poor. It's tough phrase. It's just a lot of subjectivity in
What
it.
does engineered
No,
mean? It means it's engineered, right? So it's so that they've bent the system to work rules and laws and things to benefit themselves, right? Or to before unions were allowed, they fought like hell. They killed people and beat them down and had cops paid on the payroll to beat the crap out of anything so that they didn't unionize because they didn't want to pay a higher wage. And that was for decades and decades and decades they did that, right? They
I
had
would
kids
agree.
working in factories. When the
Yes,
Italians came over, they did anything for profit. Let's not.
there is in the past. I think it's changing. I think
Right,
that
but it's
obviously,
only just recent that you'd say maybe since probably the 40s or 50s or
No,
right?
I mean, I think you're right. I do think greed is a real thing, and we've seen, greed takes control a lot, especially any type of monopoly, and they do take advantage of people. I agree with that, and I actually, again, I do think you need some amount of laws, some amount of allowing people to organize. You need to treat people fairly, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but the problem is, I mean, again, let's just talk about the stark difference. Communism tried this, and it failed miserably
yeah.
because of
But like you pointed out, though, it failed because the people in power became totalitarian and fucking tried to arrest everybody and throw people in jail. Anybody who dissented was a criminal.
right.
It wasn't like it was done in a different environment at a different time. Some parts of socialism, we have some socialism in our system. In some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad, right? But in their system, it was when a totalitarian government.
Well, you're right. It is a spectrum. In fact, I mean, if you have laissez-faire capitalism here, you have our capitalism, you have socialism, you have communism. You know, I mean, it is interesting to see what the experiment that China's doing. Right, China's trying to have its cake and eat it too. Right, they are a communist society that has a capitalist economy. It's never been tried before. In fact, the Soviet Union probably wanted to try that, but they crumbled before they could try that. Again, I don't know. The problem with like China is you just don't know what's true because all their statistics, everything's jerry rigged, everything's controlled by the government, all the information. So yeah, I don't know if they're doing good or bad, but they're experimenting in that. They have a communist society. They can make any change at any time if they see something's not working. But they have tried to have a capitalist economy because of competition and all the good parts of capitalism. They are literally trying to do it both. You could also argue that some of the famous Nordic European countries, they're supposedly some of the happiest places on earth, like Finland and Norway and Sweden, etc.
Right.
Obviously, their taxes are a lot higher. They would be a little bit more on the socialist scale, you know.
Right.
So I do think this is an area where we're not done. Governments are going to keep trying. Where is the balance between, promoting competition, promoting fairness, treating your people well, at the same time, actually having something sustainable that can last without, bankrupting the government.
Right. Joe, was that quote from him? Did you look that up?
It was actually in the book, chapter 25. It's written literally. It's a passage from the book, and I just wanted to say, I mean, we grew up. We got handed nothing. If it wasn't for the taking out school loans, I would have. I mean, I was poor. I had nothing. I went to Arizona with nothing. I got a crappy, place to live in. I remember eating peanut butter and jelly for like 3 weeks straight once when I was waiting for some commissary to open up. It was only because of Bill's benefits I was able to get cheaper food through the commissary. I don't think Mike, if he didn't go into the military, we were poor. I mean, Dad gave nothing to our future, and yet we rose from it. And now none of us will have our children. Of course, I don't have any, but as a result, Mike going into the military, now his family will live. I mean, it took one generation for us to get out of that poverty if we tried. So,
well, I don't think we were poor. We would be considered lower middle class.
Wait a minute. I had nothing. I don't know what poor is.
I think you're talking about after he kicked you out at 18.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. In other words, of course, that's when it mattered. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's like when we lifted ourselves up by ourselves.
I wonder, at that time, did you feel you were different? Did you feel like it was shameful or anything?
I didn't even know
not have anything?
With Dad, every time we ate at dinner, we ate around the table.
No, I'm talking about after, when you were 18. When you were 18, did you meet people did you know people that had money and they looked down on you, or did you?
I was so stupid. It was for my own advantage. I think, 2 jackets that Mike owned for Chaminade and wore them interchangeably. Never even considered it. Fortunately, I was at least good enough in wrestling and things like that where people didn't make fun of me to my face. And so I was so stupid, I didn't even know I was the only one wearing the same pair of pants 3 days out of a week and cycling through 2 pairs of pants, 2 pairs of shirts, and 2 jackets that were like.
Yeah. I remember getting made fun of a few times relating to that. As even in middle school, no-name jeans and in Chaminade rotating 2 jackets. It never really fazed me, though, because I was like, out of my control, oh well, so it didn't faze me because I had no agency over that. I was not like I was going to go out and buy them myself. So I was like, well, this is what it is, So
yeah, you didn't get Christine's hand-me-downs.
Mm-hmm.
Christine's hand-me-downs. Mike was like a small, so I couldn't fit on me.
That's even worse.
Plaid.
Hand-me-downs. Wow, that's bad. Holy snap.
Check out some
they
of
have
the photos.
flowers on it and shit.
Check out some of the photos. Luckily, Christine was getting her hands on her hand-me-down from Frank. So it was just.
That's summer rotation. Holy
See
shit.
some of the Christmas
Yeah,
pictures. I'm in like all
had
that.
an interesting. Matt Walsh had an interesting article where basically he was saying, I would never kick. I would not. I'm not interested in kicking my kids out at 18, and that was kind of a dad thing, and I always thought that was wrong. It's when I raised my own kids. I told them I would basically support them till 25, because 18. That's when you're just becoming an adult. That's like the hardest part. You're trying to get out of the nest, and especially now with colleges are so expensive and everything like that. So no, I knew that that kicking people out at 18 is just wrong. It's just wrong. You're not raising them. Yes, I know you can lead.
Also, there's got to be some flexibility. Ben, it should always be whatever the case demand. There should be some line, but also it should be some flexibility based on context of what the situation.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty easy judgment call, right? Can they stand on their own, right? And are they actively working it? Now, again, to be fair, if somebody is just a bum and they're saying, no, I'm not going to get a job and I don't want to do anything and I want to just smoke dope all day. Okay, goodbye, But if they're actually actively trying and they're working it and they're willing to put in the effort, then I think, you gotta do more, So I'm just saying this artificial idea. It's the old adage that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. So just because you legally can kick your kids out at 18, it doesn't mean you should.
Right. These are just some other points that they brought up. Dehumanization as a tool. You could see when they were called Okies, they got really, especially Tom. He's one of the main characters who he killed the guy, but in self-defense. The characters are interesting. They all have their own little background, and they're interesting people. And anyway, they when they were called Oakleys, it was obviously there was a diss on them, an insult. And then the Reds, it was just a way of dehumanizing them.
As you mentioned, in terms of the immigrants from Italy and Ireland, mix, wops, the same thing. It's a method to dehumanize them,
Yeah. And then I guess we are each other's salvation. I think Rosa Sharon's final act in Steinbeck's thesis, when all else fails, people still have each other. So solidarity isn't a slogan, it's survival. Unity is power. So it did seem that the mother, like you were saying, the matriarch was the one holding the family together and keeping them, I guess, their sanity. And it's easier to keep, you can get through a lot of things if you have someone standing next to you.
Right. Absolutely.
So that's pretty much it. So I'm just looking up to see if it won the Pulitzer. It did. It won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction in 1940. Yeah, so it did win the Pulitzer Prize.
Put in the Nobel. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature too. I think Steinbeck won that. It's not given to an individual work.
Yeah, 1962.
Yep. So he did get it. Yeah.
Yep, Nobel Prize in Literature. I watched the movie also, the 1940 movie, and it was all right. I mean, it's a little bit different from they don't go into the ending is not the same. They pretty much just end driving and the mother's.
Oh, you're right.
It was kind of it's interesting. It's just, I guess
think that had Henry Ford.
Much action. People didn't need much action back in those movies, but nowadays it would be considered.
Didn't Henry Ford play Tom? I think Henry Ford played Tom.
Did he? Huh.
Pretty sure. Isn't his name Henry Ford? I forget. He's a famous actor. He was one I think in when he was older he did on Golden Pond. Anyway, I'm pretty sure he played Tom. Tom Joad, the Joad family.
Yeah.
All right. Well, excellent job. I'll be doing I'll be doing probably a second part on nihilism. I read that short story on Dostoevsky. I may broaden it a little bit to it's either Dostoevsky or Dostoevsky, however you're supposed to pronounce it. Very famous Russian writer. He has a short story that talks about nihilism. So I felt it was, I kind of stumbled upon it. But since I believe nihilism is such an important topic, and I think it is sort of a cultural infestation right now. I think it's something we need to keep addressing. So I'm going to do kind of part 2 of nihilism, and I'm going to talk about, I'm going to review Dostoevsky's story, The Dream of a Ridiculous Man. So
Cool.
All right, gentlemen.
Arrivederci.